months leading up to this review have been interesting. Thundercross 2 finally blasted out of Konami's vault and landed onto our consoles after being stuck in legal limbo for 30 years. 30 years of languishing in emulators and any retro arcade in Japan still operating working boards, making today's subject very elusive to people that aren't on the wrong side of the law. It finally happened though. Konami left it up to Hamster to port this bad boy over to Nintendo Switch and PlayStation 4, finally giving the game playing public a chance to complete their arcade Gradius collection. This is a momentous occasion for not only Gradius fans, but games preservation as a whole. The fact Konami even bothered to provide Hamster with boards of an obscure game like this proves there is interest in both marketing and playing the masterpieces that built generations of gamers all around the world. I jumped at the chance to buy this when it released, and as of the time of this recording, you can find me high up on the PlayStation 4 leaderboard. When people buy these releases, they aren't just supporting keeping their favorite games relevant, but they're encouraging the publishers and the developers, if applicable, to make their catalog of games widely available. It isn't trivial to write good emulators. Good emulation takes resources and commitment, so just by buying these games, you're proving these efforts are financially worthwhile. In recognition of this game finally filling the gaping hole in the Gradius shelf, I'm inviting all of you to take a flight aboard Thundercross 2. First, a quick pre-flight briefing for anyone that doesn't know what Gradius is all about. Gradius is a series of side-scrolling shoot-em-ups in which you thrust your way through gauntlets of ferocious alien armadas, all of which have distinct attack patterns that you have to strategize against using your dexterity and a selection of swappable weapons. It was backed by exceptionally crisp graphics for its age, solid music composition with extremely moving and memorable tunes, and an excellent challenge curve that taxed you without ever feeling too overwhelming. Likewise, Thundercross 1 is a Gradius spin-off that kept the fundamentals of the series intact while implementing new ideas and changing the rules around just enough to warrant distinguishing it from regular Gradius, becoming a great game on its own merits. I reviewed both of these games on my channel already if you want to delve into greater detail, but it gives you context on what to expect for our current subject, Thundercross 2. As the name would imply, it follows up on the rule set and ideas established in Thundercross 1, making it the best candidate for comparison. But the earlier Gradius games should also be considered since it's all part of the same game design family. You'll be smacked with a sense of deja vu as the Black Impulse Army returns to mess up your day, sending you through another 7 stages of bullet-puking hazards that get progressively more difficult in this classic shoot-em-up setup. The campaign to conquer your alien adversaries is hard and sprinkled with spicy, much-needed variety. Konami were the undisputed kings of action game design, because as of this game, they had an entire decade worth of stage design experience starting with Scramble, and it shines just as bright in Thundercross 2 as it ever does. No 2 levels have scenery or gimmicks that are copy-pasted either. Dare I say they've gotten better at preventing their games from being repetitive since the older titles by this point? It starts off relatively basic with a straightforward flight above an oceanscape, but it quickly evolves into taking hints from Darius, giving you multiple different routes to choose from in Stage 2, a first in the Gradius series, letting you decide whether or not you want to travel to the blazing lava area or face mechanized mayhem below. Then you blast off into space to mount an assault on the aliens by blasting their guarded door down and laying waste to anything that awaits within. Wait a minute, that's familiar. No matter, because on your way back, you have to face their Super Star Destroyer and break all the individual turrets and layers of armor to sneak your way through its guts to destroy the core and prevent it from doing any damage to the planet below. Hang on! Haven't we done that already too? It's all wrapped up with the player paying a visit to the alien homeworld to destroy the brains of the enemy to bring peace back once and for... Okay, you get the picture. I'm going to cut right to the chase. Thundercross 2 is a shameless rehash of all the best ideas introduced in the other Gradius games, and it was extremely obvious that Konami was running out of ideas for these games at this point. It's bound to happen to even the most creative designers if they're constantly working on the same game annually. But if you think that makes this sequel lazy or effortless, you'd not only be dead wrong, you'd be cheating yourself out of an extremely polished, action-filled treat that had 10 years of refinement behind it. Yes, Thundercross 2 lacks originality, but it more than makes up for it by being the most polished game in the entire Gradius series when it was released. There's an old saying that goes, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Truer words couldn't be spoken for this game. I believe most of the enhancements come from a jump in hardware power. As Thundercross 2 flaunts the full strength of Sunset Riders hardware to bring you buttery smooth controls, an even better soundtrack with a welcome return to stereo after Thundercross 1 downgraded to mono, and most importantly, superb pixel art graphics blooming with color, advanced effects and animation that clearly had tons of effort poured into making an impression. There's 6 layers of background clouds in level 1, which all scroll at different speeds, with the occasional foreground object to make this the best looking sky scene I've seen in a long time. But I'm especially impressed by the clever use of scaling effects which can resize any object on a whim. It's used to make these alien bases feel like they're alive and something could pop out of these metal fins at any moment. The rest of the game continues to look just as impressive, like the heavy animation poured into this infernal engine pumping out gas to the battleship you're infiltrating in Stage 5. And the only other thing that comes close to looking as good as this is another game in the Gradius series, called Zezex. Meanwhile, the Konami FM Synthesizer Orchestra blesses your time with these rockin' tunes which are all good. This time around, you have Mikio Saito to thank for all his hard work on making this metal soundtrack to bang your long hair to. Spectacle is super important, but it can't carry a game alone. Thus, the biggest question of them all. How does this game play, and how does it compare to other shooters similar to it? Very tight and intellectual, and I wouldn't expect anything less. Much like Thundercross 1, distinguished enemy waves will drop vital power-ups for you to collect, which dispense repositionable option pods to multiply your firepower, speed-ups, and most importantly, 4 different weapons to choose from that vary in usefulness depending on the part of the level you're in. Retaining the strategic element of choosing wisely for any given situation. The boomerangs and the twin shot return without much alteration, and both of them are just as good as you'd want them to be. Your handy-dandy fidget spinners are useful for taking out enemies scattered across the screen as they bounce around, and the twin shot making mincemeat out of anything behind you while doing a solid job covering the front of your ship too. But the two that are different are the Vulcan and the normal shot. The Vulcan cannon doesn't fire faster the more you level it up this time around. Rather, it fires fast by default, at the expense of cutting your firepower in half, making it severely nerfed and not worthwhile compared to the other thing that got an overhaul. Your regular starting weapon. The N power-up, short for normal, was made the strongest gun in the entire game to compensate for its lack of versatility. And as such, you can actually switch back to it whenever you need the extra firepower for a frontal assault or a boss. It feels good that the starting weapon is not a wimpy pea shooter. It's a real weapon that's just as useful as the twin and boomerang are, and I found myself using it on more than one occasion to prevent too many enemies from flooding the screen, especially at the beginning of Stage 6, leading to a total of 3 viable weapons, giving you just as much choice and variety as you had in Thundercross 1. The ultra-satisfying hyper weapons also return when you're fully powered up, And they're even better than they were before because 2 of them have been beefed up. The laser is virtually identical to its Thundercross 1 counterpart, and that's a good thing. It still melts everything that's caught up in the screen engulfing beam of light. But the flamethrower behaves completely differently, shooting fire phoenixes out of a gaping dragon mouth. They zoom right past walls and travel the entire length of the screen, raining hellfire on all that threaten you. It's as awesome as it sounds! Burn, baby, burn! The Crush, or Napalm in Thundercross 1, underwent the biggest change. Not detonating when it touches a wall anymore, but creating a huge circle of carnage on the right half of the screen, making this the most situational one out of the bunch. But perfect for melting bosses like Dinosaur Jr. at the end of Stage 4. Yes, that's its name. It's goofy, it's silly, and I love it. As usual, it's up to you to use your intellect to choose the best times to pull out all these weapons. And these choices aren't entirely rigid. The difficulty is forgiving enough to allow you to create your own strategies to beat whatever the game throws at you. And have a big ol' blast in the process. On the surface, you'd rinse and repeat for 7 more stages until you overcome all the odds, and the final stage that you aren't allowed to use continues on, and pat yourself on the back when you become skilled enough to loop the game multiple times over to get really high scores. Except, Thundercross 2 has an ace up its sleeve, and it's called Rank. You might also know it as Dynamic Difficulty Adjustment, or Adaptive Difficulty, and it's easily the most controversial and divisive design decision that Konami's ever used in their games, starting with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. The idea behind Rank is to maximize the earnings of a game for an arcade operator by making the game harder if it detects a player is good at it. More inexperienced players will get slower bullets and weaker enemies to make the game approachable. Then when they start getting good, the challenge is gradually cranked up to ensure that veteran players aren't staying in the game as long as they were able to before. Thundercross 2 jacks the difficulty up the more power-ups you collect and severely decreases it if you die at any point. You're probably asking an important question. Is that going to hamper your enjoyment of the game? Not really. Konami did not want to risk alienating their players by making an impossibly difficult game. So Loop 1, at the very least, was carefully designed around being doable with 1 credit regardless of your power level or how many hyper weapons you used. It's well balanced, and the difficulty reductions when you die ensure that you can recover from a mistake in every area of the game, making it as fair as Gradius 1, but harder than Life Force or Thundercross 1 for sure. But it is something you'll have to watch out for if you plan on chasing a high score by playing multiple loops of the game, as it is endless. If you go too crazy collecting items in Loop 2 onwards, you might run into a situation like I did here, where this wall was literally impossible to destroy after my death because its health was so jacked up. Pro tip: if you really don't want to worry too much about rank, make sure you pick up shop power-ups before you pick up speed-ups. Shop power-ups are much more important and increase enemy health less than speed-ups do. There's only one more thing to cover here, and it's the game's longevity. Just like any other shoot-'em-up that has limited game length, half the fun of the game is not breezing through it once and never playing it again. It's refining your skills and learning smart strategies to get as high of a score as possible. I already mentioned that the last stage cuts off continues, and being able to beat that without save stating is a good goal to work towards. Even if that wasn't the wisest business strategy because of its potential to annoy casual players that weren't in that mindset. You can make that $7 price tag worth it by being one of the elites that are capable of finishing the last level legitimately, and taking your runs as far as you possibly can on the online leaderboards. Seeing how high you can pump that number up turns a half-hour game into a 10 or 20-hour game. Besides, practicing the last level nowadays isn't an issue anymore thanks to the inclusion of save states you can place anywhere you're having trouble, so you can think things through under less pressure. All the usual features you'd expect out of a hamster port are here and then some, including a time attack mode where you try to rack up as many points as you can in 5 minutes. That's all I have to say about Thunder Cross 2. Anything else would be regurgitating common knowledge established back in Gradius 1, so we're gonna give this bad boy a grade. For being another galactic crusade of fun that's a little low in the ideas department, Thunder Cross 2 gets an A-. If you don't own or haven't played that many Gradius games before, this one's a no-brainer. But if you're already a Gradius fan and you're looking for more levels to play, this is a pretty safe bet. It might not be as big of a deal as Down Gun Feveron being ported to a home console for the first time, but Thunder Cross 2 is a worthy addition to any action gamer's library.